The Volithari delegation arrived at Earth's orbital station with great pride and ceremony. Their ships were the finest in their empire, polished until they shone like silver mirrors against the darkness of space. Ambassador Kyrvith stood at the front of his group, his scaled body covered in beautiful robes that showed his high rank. Behind him walked 30 diplomats and warriors, all of them believing they were about to change human history forever. Kyrvith had studied humanity for many years. He knew they were a young species, merely 500 years into space travel. They had spread to only 12 star systems, a tiny number compared to the mighty Volithari Dominion. His people controlled thousands of worlds and commanded a fleet of 400,000 warships. They had ruled this part of the galaxy for 8,000 years, crushing anyone who stood against them. Today, Kyrvith would offer these primitive humans a great gift. He would bring them under Volithari protection. They would be grateful, of course. Every species was grateful when the Dominion offered its shield. Admiral Grace Sullivan waited for them in the station's greeting hall. She was a tall woman with gray hair cut short and eyes that gave nothing away. Beside her stood Lieutenant Commander Danny Ortiz, a younger officer with dark hair and a calm expression. Neither of them seemed impressed by the Volithari procession. Kyrvith approached with what humans would recognize as a smile. His jaw plates parted slightly, showing his pleasure at this historic moment. He spread his arms wide in a gesture of welcome. "Admiral Sullivan," he said through his translator device, "the Volithari Dominion greets humanity with open arms. We have watched your progress with great interest. Your expansion into 12 systems is quite good for a species of your age." Grace nodded politely. "We are honored by your visit, Ambassador. We come with gifts," Kyrvith continued. He gestured to one of his aides, who stepped forward carrying a crystal box. "Inside this container are plans for fusion power systems far beyond your current technology. We also bring medical knowledge that will help your people live much longer lives. But most importantly, we bring you our protection." He paused, letting his words sink in. This was always his favorite part. "The galaxy is a dangerous place, Admiral. There are threats out there that your young species cannot imagine. The Dominion has kept peace in this region for 8,000 years. We have destroyed empires that threatened stability. We have crushed warlords and pirates. We have brought order where there was only chaos." Kyrvith walked to the observation window and pointed at the 12 Volithari warships hanging in space outside. Each one was a kilometer long, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. "Our fleet is the largest in the known galaxy. 400,000 vessels, each one crewed by the finest warriors in existence. Under our protection, humanity will never need to fear anything." Grace remained quiet, her face showing no emotion. "Of course," Kyrvith added, "there are certain things we would expect in return. Trade agreements that benefit both our peoples. Sharing of resources. A small tribute, as is the custom for protected species. And naturally, you would follow Dominion guidance in matters of expansion." He pulled out a small device and activated a holographic map. It showed human space as a tiny blue dot, surrounded by vast regions marked in Volithari red. A few small systems glowed green at the edges. "We have already selected the systems you may colonize over the next century," Kyrvith explained. "These green zones are safe for human expansion. The red zones are Dominion territory and must not be entered without permission." The green zones were small, poor systems with few resources. The message was clear. Humanity would grow only as fast as the Volithari allowed. "This is very generous," Grace said. Her voice was flat. "We think so," Kyrvith agreed, pleased that she understood her place. "Most species receive far less. But humanity has shown potential. With proper guidance, you may one day earn a junior seat on our Galactic Council." He folded his clawed hands together, feeling very satisfied with how this meeting was going. Soon, humanity would sign the protection agreement, and another species would join the Dominion's long list of subjects. Now then, Admiral, shall we discuss the details of your integration into the Dominion? Grace glanced at Danny, who had a strange look on his face, almost like he was trying not to laugh. She turned back to Kyrvith. That is very kind of you, Ambassador. But before we discuss any agreements, perhaps you would like to see our fleet? It is standard diplomatic courtesy to show ships on both sides. Kyrvith made a clicking sound that was his species' version of a chuckle. Of course, Admiral. We would be happy to look at your vessels. I am sure they are quite impressive by human standards. He expected to see maybe a dozen ships. Perhaps 20 if humanity had gathered everything they had. His intelligence reports suggested humans had no more than 100 military vessels in their entire civilization. It would be amusing to compare them to Velithari warships. Grace smiled. It was the first time her expression had changed during the entire meeting. Danny, she said, signal the 7th Fleet. Tell them to decloak. Kyrvith's translator must have made an error. Decloak? The first ship appeared like a ghost becoming solid dot. It materialized off the station's left side, a massive thing of black metal and sharp angles. 3 kilometers long, twice the size of any Velithari vessel. Weapons covered its hull, systems that Kyrvith's tactical computer could not identify. His mouth fell open. That is the Steadfast, Grace said calmly. A Titan-class dreadnought. Your flagship, Kyrvith managed to say. His voice was weak. No, just part of the escort group. More ships appeared. Then more. Then more. They came out of nothing like sharks rising from dark water. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, dreadnoughts. Each one was larger than anything in the Velithari formation. Each one carried weapons that made Kyrvith's finest warships look like toys. His aides were making sounds of fear behind him. The Velithari warriors had gone very still. How many? Kyrvith whispered. Danny checked the display. 147 ships in the 7th Fleet, Ambassador. Kyrvith stared at the human officer. The 7th Fleet? Yes, our smallest active fleet. The ambassador turned back to the observation window. His 12 proud warships now floated like tiny fish surrounded by whales. Human dreadnoughts loomed over them from every direction, their weapon systems glowing with quiet power. Grace Sullivan walked to stand beside him. Her reflection in the window looked perfectly calm. Would you like to know more about our Navy, Ambassador? In the interest of good relations between our peoples, of course. Kyrvith could not speak. His mind was trying to understand what he was seeing, but nothing made sense. This was impossible. Humanity was young. Humanity was weak. Humanity was supposed to be grateful for Velithari protection. I think, Grace continued, that we need to have a very different conversation than the one you planned, Ambassador. A conversation between equals. She gestured toward the conference room. Shall we? Ambassador Kyrvith sat in the conference room with his legs feeling weak beneath him. Through the window behind Admiral Sullivan, he could still see the human fleet surrounding his ships. 147 vessels in what they called their smallest fleet. The number kept repeating in his mind like a broken recording. His aides sat beside him, their scales pale with shock. The Velithari warriors who had seemed so proud an hour ago now looked like frightened children. None of them had ever faced a situation like this. Grace Sullivan sat across the table with complete calm. Danny Ortiz stood beside her, and there was also a third human now. An older woman with gray streaks in her dark hair, and eyes that seemed to look straight through Kyrvith into his very soul. This is Director Beth Callahan, Grace said. She leads our Historical Preservation Division. Kyrvith's translator struggled with the title. Historical Preservation? Yes. Before we continue, Ambassador, I would like to show you something. Beth leaned forward. Tell me, what do your records say about the Heron? The question hit Carveth like a blow to the chest. Every species in the galaxy knew about the Heron. They were an ancient civilization that had ruled half the known universe 12,000 years ago. Their ruins could be found on thousands of worlds. Their technology was beyond priceless, and their disappearance remained the greatest mystery in galactic history. The Heron vanished approximately 12,000 years ago, Carveth said carefully. No one knows what happened to them. Some say disease. Some say civil war. Their empire simply ended. We know what happened, Beth said. She touched a control on the table. The room's holographic systems came alive, replacing the star maps with images that made Carveth want to scream. He saw creatures unlike anything in Velithari records. Massive things that were part machine and part organic nightmare. Some were the size of moons. Others moved in swarms of millions, blocking out the light of stars. In the recordings, he watched them crack planets open like eggs and harvest the cores for purposes beyond understanding. We call them the Devourers, Beth explained. They are an intelligence from outside our galaxy. They see biological life as nothing more than a resource to be consumed. Carveth could not look away from the images. He saw worlds burning. He saw fleets being swallowed whole. He saw the Heron, once the greatest civilization in the galaxy, being eaten alive. They entered our galaxy 14,000 years ago through a tier in space near what you call the outer reaches, Grace said. The Heron were the first advanced civilization they found. The Heron fought back, Beth continued. They were brave, and their technology was impressive. But the Devourers had been consuming civilizations for millions of years. The Heron never had a chance. The holographic display changed again. Now it showed something that made even less sense. Ships that were unmistakably human, fighting the Devourers in battles that stretched across solar systems. These ships were different from the fleet outside, older designs, but they carried the same angular style. The same black holes. Humanity did not originate in this galaxy, Ambassador, Grace said quietly. We came here 12,000 years ago, fleeing the Devourers. We have been fighting them for longer than your species has existed. When we arrived, we found the Heron making their last stand. We helped them as much as we could, Beth added. It was not enough to save their civilization, but together we managed to push the Devourers back to their entry point. Back to the rift. Carveth felt dizzy. Everything he knew about the galaxy was falling apart. The rift? Grace nodded. A permanent tier in space-time that connects our galaxy to wherever the Devourers came from. It cannot be closed, only guarded. We have been guarding it for 12,000 years. The Dead Zone, Carveth whispered. He thought of the region on Velithari star maps that was marked with warnings. A vast area of space where no signals came out and no probes ever returned. The Dominion had always assumed it was a natural hazard, some kind of dangerous space that was best avoided. 2,300 warships stationed there at all times, Danny said. Fighting when the Devourers try to push through, which they do every few centuries. Waiting for the day when they come in full force. Carveth's hands were shaking. You have been there all this time, watching us, watching everyone. We had to, Grace said. The galaxy was not ready to know the truth. If we had revealed ourselves too soon, there would have been panic, wars, chaos. The species of this galaxy would have destroyed each other before the real enemy even arrived. But you are telling us now, Carveth said, because you are ready now. Beth changed the display to show a timeline of Velithari technological progress. We have been watching your civilization develop for thousands of years. Your weapons, your ships, your ability to work together. You have finally reached a point where you might be useful. Danny pulled up another holographic map. This one showed human territory, but not the tiny 12 systems the Velithari had mapped. It showed thousands of systems. Tens of thousands. We control over 4,000 colonized worlds, Grace explained. Another 8,000 systems are used for resources and shipbuilding. We kept our presence hidden from your scouts because we were not ready to make contact. Kyrvith stared at the map. The Velithari Dominion, once the greatest power he knew, was a tiny patch compared to human space. Your fleet of 400,000 ships is impressive, Grace continued. Truly, your species has done well with the time you had. But you should understand what you are dealing with now, Ambassador. She stood and walked to the window. We have approximately 2 million active warships. Our shipyards can build more within months if we need them. We have weapons that your scientists cannot even imagine. We have been preparing for a war that will decide the fate of every living thing in this galaxy. She turned to face him, and Kyrvith saw something ancient in her eyes. Something that did not belong in a species the Velithari had thought was only 5 centuries old. You came here thinking you would offer us protection, Grace said. Instead, you found the ones who have been protecting you since before your ancestors learned to make fire. Kyrvith sat in silence for a long moment. His entire understanding of the universe had been destroyed in less than an hour. The Velithari Dominion, proud rulers of their sector, were nothing more than children playing at Empire while humanity stood guard against the real darkness. What do you want from us? He finally asked. Grace placed a small crystal on the table. This contains technology that will advance your civilization by thousands of years. Weapons, shields, medical knowledge. Everything you need to become true warriors. In exchange, join us, not as subjects, but as allies. The Devourers will come again. When they do, we will need every ship, every soldier, every species in this galaxy fighting together. We are offering you the chance to stand with us instead of hiding behind us. Beth leaned forward. The choice is yours, Ambassador. You can take our offer back to your High Council. You can tell them the truth about the galaxy. Or you can refuse and go back to believing you are the greatest power in existence. Kyrvith looked at the crystal, then at the fleet outside, then at the ancient eyes of the woman who had just shattered everything he knew. I will take your message to the High Council, he said. And I think, Admiral Sullivan, that we have much to discuss. Grace smiled. I was hoping you would say that. The news spread through the Velithari Dominion like fire through dry grass. Within days of Ambassador Kyrvith's return, every corner of the Empire was talking about what he had discovered. The recordings he brought back were played on every screen. The images of the Devourers, of the human fleet, of the truth about the Harran were impossible to ignore. The High Council met in emergency session. For 3 days they argued. Some refused to believe. Some demanded war against humanity for deceiving them. But in the end, the evidence was too strong to deny. Kyrvith had brought sensor data, historical records, and footage from the dead zone itself. He had brought proof that everything the Dominion believed about the galaxy was wrong. On the 4th day, the High Council voted. They would accept humanity's offer of alliance. Captain Kevin Park received the news while standing on the bridge of the Resolute, a Harbinger-class cruiser assigned to escort the first official Velithari delegation to the dead zone. He was a veteran of 3 centuries of service, and he had seen many strange things in his long life. But nothing had prepared him for the sight waiting at the end of this journey. The Resolute carried 50 Velithari observers, including Ambassador Kyrvith himself. They had been quiet during the journey, speaking little to the human crew. Kevin understood. Their entire understanding of the universe had been shattered. They needed time to accept their new reality. Dropping out of faster than light in 30 seconds, Captain. Lieutenant Amy Ruiz reported from the navigation station. Kevin nodded. Tell our guests to come to the observation deck. They should see this for themselves." The ship slowed and returned to normal space at the edge of the dead zone. Kevin heard gasps from the Velethari observers as the view screen came alive. The rift dominated everything. It was a wound in space itself, a tear in the fabric of reality that stretched across thousands of kilometers. Its edges crackled with energies that hurt to look at directly. Strange lights flickered within its depths. Hints of something beyond that defied understanding dot around the rift. Informations that covered the entire region hung the Guardian fleet, 2,300 warships. Each one a veteran of countless battles against enemies from outside the galaxy. Their hulls were scarred, marked by damage that no repair could completely erase. These were ships that had been fighting the same war for 12,000 years. And beyond the fleet, visible only through special sensors, moved shadows. Vast shapes pressed against the other side of the rift, testing the membrane between dimensions. The Devourers were watching. They were waiting. Ambassador Karavath stood beside Kevin, his scales pale. "They are always there." "Always," Kevin confirmed. "They probe our defenses every few decades. Test our weapons. Look for weakness. So far we have held them back, but they are patient. They have been consuming galaxies for millions of years. A few thousand years of waiting means nothing to them. How do your crews bear it? Standing watch against something like that?" Kevin was silent for a moment. "It is what we were born to do, Ambassador. Humanity has been fighting this war since before we came to this galaxy. Our children are raised knowing that one day they may have to stand against the darkness. It is not a burden. It is a duty." The Velethari observers spent 3 days at the dead zone, watching the Guardian fleet operate. They saw patrol ships engage a group of Devourer scouts that tried to slip through the rift. They watched human weapons tear apart creatures that should have been unstoppable. They began to understand why humanity had hidden for so long. When they returned to Velethari space, everything began to change. The Dominion opened its military academies to human advisors. Technologies flowed between the two civilizations. Human engineers helped the Velethari improve their weapons. Velethari scientists shared shield technology that humans had never developed. For the first time in 8,000 years, the Dominion was learning instead of teaching. Other species began to emerge from hiding. The crystalline makers revealed themselves, survivors of a Devourer attack on their homeworld 8,000 years ago. They had been living in asteroid belts, pretending to be extinct, waiting for someone strong enough to fight back. Now they offered their unique knowledge of energy manipulation to the growing alliance. The Chorus came next, a species that communicated through music and thought as a single mind spread across thousands of bodies. They could coordinate fleets across impossible distances, allowing ships to act as one unit, even when separated by light years. Their abilities would prove vital in the battles to come. Even former enemies joined the cause. Species that the Velethari had conquered centuries ago were offered freedom in exchange for military service. Old hatreds were set aside. The threat of extinction had a way of making past conflicts seem small. 1 year after first contact, the Galactic Defense Council held its first meeting. Representatives from 47 species gathered in a massive station built at the border of human and Velethari space. Admiral Grace Sullivan stood at the center of the assembly, looking out at the most diverse gathering in galactic history. "For 12,000 years," she said, "humanity has stood watch alone. We made that choice because the galaxy was not ready. Revealing ourselves too soon would have caused panic, conflict, wars that would weaken us when the real enemy came." She paused, looking at the gathered delegates. "But you are ready now. We have seen your courage, your creativity, your willingness to put aside old hatreds for survival. The Devourers chose this galaxy because they thought it would be easy. Billions of lives divided and fighting each other while they gathered their strength. Her voice grew stronger. They were wrong. This galaxy is not weak. This galaxy is not divided. This galaxy will stand together and fight. The chamber erupted in sounds of agreement. Clicks, whistles, musical tones, and human applause blended into a single expression of unity. Species that had never spoken to each other before found common ground in their determination to survive. Over the following years, the alliance grew stronger. Shipyards across the galaxy produced warships at unprecedented rates. Training academies taught soldiers from dozens of species how to fight together. Scientists from different worlds shared knowledge that advanced technology by centuries. Kevin Park, promoted to Admiral of the 3rd Combined Fleet, watched the transformation with something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. Double quotes. Do you think we can win? Lieutenant Amy Ruiz asked him one day, as they watched a joint training exercise between human and Velithari ships. Kevin considered the question carefully. I think we have a chance. Before, humanity was fighting alone against an enemy that had consumed entire galaxies. Now we have allies. We have resources. We have something to fight for beyond simple survival. He looked out at the mixed fleet, human and Velithari ships flying in perfect formation. The Devourers have never faced anything like this. They have always attacked divided civilizations, species that were too busy fighting each other to stand together. They do not know what a united galaxy can do. Amy nodded slowly. And if we lose, then we lose together. But I do not think we will lose, Lieutenant. I think we are going to show those things from outside our galaxy what happens when they choose the wrong universe to invade. The training exercise ended, and the ships broke formation, preparing for the next drill. Somewhere in the dead zone, the Devourers watched and waited. But they were not the only ones preparing for what was coming. The galaxy was getting ready for war. 300 years passed. 300 years of preparation, training, and building. 300 years of waiting for the storm that everyone knew was coming. Commander Lisa Nakamura had spent her entire life preparing for this day. She had trained at the Combined Fleet Academy on Velithari Prime. She had served on Guardian ships at the Dead Zone, watching the shadows move behind the rift. She had commanded destroyers, cruisers, and finally earned her position as captain of the Unconquered, a Titan-class dreadnought and flagship of the 3rd Combined Fleet. Now, standing on the bridge of her ship, she watched the rift tear itself wider than it had ever been. All stations report ready, her weapons officer called out. Main batteries charged and waiting. Chorus network is active, Lieutenant Tommy Santos added from communications. We have tactical connection with all allied elements across the defensive line. Lisa gripped the arms of her command chair. Through the view screen, she could see the Guardian fleet taking position. But it was not the same fleet that had stood watch for 12,000 years. It had grown. Ships from 19 different species now held the line alongside human vessels. Velithari dreadnoughts flew beside crystalline Maker warships. Chorus coordination vessels hung at the center of each formation, their musical transmissions linking thousands of ships into single fighting units. 200,000 vessels in total. The largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. And it still might not be enough. The rift pulsed with sick light. Something was pushing through from the other side. Something massive. Something hungry. Contact, the sensor officer reported, his voice tight with controlled fear. Multiple contacts. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Lisa watched the tactical display fill with red markers. The Devourers were coming in numbers that made previous incursions look like scouting parties. World ships the size of small moons led the assault, surrounded by swarms of smaller creatures that blocked out the stars. All ships, weapons free, Lisa commanded. Show them what 300 years of preparation looks like. The Unconquered opened fire. Her main batteries released energy that could crack planets, focused into beams that burned through devour flesh and armor alike. Around her, 200,000 ships added their own fire. The void lit up like a sun being born. The first wave of devourers crashed against the defensive line and shattered. Creatures that had consumed entire civilizations found themselves facing weapons designed specifically to kill them. Velethari shields absorbed attacks that would have destroyed ships 3 centuries ago. Maker energy systems powered weapons beyond anything the Alliance had possessed before. Chorus coordination let entire fleets move as one, concentrating fire with perfect timing. But the Devourers kept coming. The battle raged for hours that felt like days. Lisa lost track of how many times the Unconquered had been hit, how many crew members she had lost, how many enemy creatures they had destroyed. The tactical display was a chaos of red and blue markers, formations breaking and reforming, ships dying and being replaced. A world ship pushed through the defensive line, its bulk simply too massive to stop. Lisa watched it heading for a formation of Velethari cruisers that were already damaged from earlier fighting. "All forward batteries, target that thing's core," she ordered. "Helm, bring us into close range." "Commander, that will put us directly in its attack path," her first officer warned. "I know. Do it anyway." The Unconquered surged forward, her engines pushing to maximum. The world ship turned toward them, sensing easier prey. Its weapons charged, preparing to consume another vessel as it had consumed countless others over millions of years. Lisa waited until they were close enough to see the creature's surface rippling with hunger. "Fire everything." The Unconquered unleashed her full arsenal at point-blank range. Beams of energy punched through the world ship's outer shell. Missiles detonated inside its body. The creature screamed, a sound that traveled through space itself somehow, and then it died, its massive form breaking apart into a billion pieces. The Velethari cruisers escaped destruction. Their commander sent a brief message of thanks before returning to the battle. Days passed. Then weeks. The fighting never stopped. Ships rotated out of the line when their ammunition ran low or their crews needed rest, only to return hours later and continue fighting. The dead were counted in millions. Crews and soldiers from every species in the Alliance giving their lives to hold the line. But still, the Devourers kept coming. "They are not retreating," Lisa observed during one brief pause in the fighting. Her uniform was stained with blood, some of it her own from a wound she barely remembered receiving. They have never faced real resistance before. They do not understand what is happening. Admiral Kevin Park's image appeared on her view screen. He had aged in the centuries since the Alliance formed, his hair white and his face lined with scars. But his eyes were still sharp, still determined. "They are learning," Kevin said, "which means we need to end this before they adapt. All fleet commanders, prepare for Operation Sunrise." Lisa felt her heart beat faster. She knew about Operation Sunrise. Every senior commander did. It was the final option, the plan that might end the war forever. It was also almost certainly a death sentence for anyone who participated. "The rift cannot be closed from this side," Kevin continued. "But it can be closed from the other side. The anchors holding it open are in their dimension. Destroy the anchors, and the rift collapses." "You are asking for volunteers to go through," Lisa said. "I am leading them myself." Kevin's face showed no fear, only resolve. "The Dawn's Light and 3,000 volunteer ships will enter the rift and destroy the anchors while the main fleet holds the line here. We have been planning this for 300 years. The ships are equipped with weapons specifically designed to damage the anchors. We know where they are. We know how to reach them." "Admiral, you cannot." "I can. I must." Kevin smiled, and for a moment, Lisa saw the young captain he had been centuries ago, full of hope and determination. I have been fighting this war my entire life, Commander. My grandfather fought it. My grandmother fought it. We have been waiting for this moment for 12,000 years. Let me finish what my ancestors started. Lisa wanted to argue. She wanted to demand that someone else lead the volunteer fleet. But she understood duty. She understood sacrifice. She understood that some things were worth dying for. It has been an honor serving under you, Admiral, she said. The honor was mine, Commander. Now hold the line until we finish the job. The volunteer fleet gathered at the edge of the rift. 3,000 ships, crewed entirely by soldiers who knew they would not return. Humans, Velithari, makers, chorus members, and representatives from a dozen other species. They had all chosen this mission. They had all chosen to sacrifice themselves for a galaxy they would never see again. Kevin Park stood on the bridge of the Dawn's Light, watching the rift pulse before him. His crew was calm, prepared for what was coming. They had made their peace with death. All ships, Kevin said over the fleet-wide channel. It has been my privilege to serve alongside you. What we do today will be remembered for as long as there are beings left to remember. Our names will be spoken with honor. Our sacrifice will have meaning. He took a deep breath. Let's go show those things what the children of this galaxy are made of. All ships, forward. The volunteer fleet entered the rift, disappearing into the other side one ship at a time. Lisa watched them go, tears running down her face despite her best efforts to stay composed. Behind her, the battle continued. But somewhere in another dimension, the real war was just beginning. The rift pulsed like a wound that refused to heal. Commander Lisa Nakamura stood on the bridge of the damaged Unconquered, watching the swirling chaos where 3,000 volunteers had disappeared hours ago. Around her, the battle continued. Devourers kept pushing through, and the Allied fleet kept destroying them. But everyone was waiting. Everyone was hoping. Any signal from the volunteer fleet? Lisa asked. Lieutenant Tommy Santos shook his head. Nothing, Commander. Communications cannot penetrate the rift. We have no way of knowing what is happening on the other side. Lisa turned back to the view screen. The Unconquered had been hit 17 times during the battle. Half her weapons were offline. A third of her crew was dead or wounded. But she refused to leave the line. Not now. Not when everything depended on what happened next. On the other side of the rift, Admiral Kevin Park led his fleet through a dimension that defied description. The space here was wrong, twisted in ways that hurt to perceive. Colors existed that had no names. Shapes moved in the distance that the human mind could not process, but the anchors were visible. 3 massive structures, each one larger than a planet, generating the energy that kept the rift open. They pulse with dark light, feeding power into the womb between dimensions. All ships break into assault groups, Kevin commanded. 1,000 ships per anchor. Hit them with everything you have. Do not stop firing until they are destroyed, or we are dead. The volunteer fleet split apart, each group racing toward its target. The Devourers here were different from the ones in normal space. Older, stronger. They had been protecting these anchors for longer than most species had existed. They were not prepared for what was coming. The Dawn's Light led the assault on the first anchor. Her weapons, designed specifically for this mission over 300 years of preparation, tore into the structure's surface. Energy crackled and sparked as systems that had operated for millions of years began to fail. Devour defenders swarmed toward the human ship. Kevin watched them coming on his tactical display, thousands of creatures ready to tear his vessel apart. All batteries, keep firing on the anchor, he ordered. Ignore the defenders. Admiral, they will destroy us, his first officer said. We knew that when we volunteered. Our job is to take down that anchor. Nothing else matters. The Dawn's light shuddered as Devourer attacks began hitting her hull. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Crew members died at their stations, killed by explosions and decompression. But the weapons kept firing. The anchor kept taking damage. Around the fleet, other ships were dying the same way. They flew straight at their targets, ignoring the creatures tearing them apart, focused only on their mission. Each ship that fell passed its targeting data to the survivors. Each death brought them closer to victory. The first anchor exploded. It happened with a flash of light that blinded sensors across the dimension. The energy it had been generating for millions of years was released in a single instant, vaporizing everything within thousands of kilometers. 500 volunteer ships died in that moment, but they died knowing they had succeeded. Kevin Park did not have time to celebrate. His ship was barely holding together, and there were still 2 anchors remaining. All surviving ships from the first assault group joined the attack on Anchor 2, he ordered. We finish this now. In normal space, Lisa saw the rift flicker for the first time. What was that? She demanded. Tommy checked his instruments with shaking hands. Energy readings from the rift are dropping. Something is happening on the other side. The Devourers in normal space felt it too. Their attacks became more desperate, more frenzied. They understood what was happening. The door they had kept open for so long was beginning to close. All ships, increase fire, Lisa commanded. Give the volunteers time to finish their work. The Allied fleet pushed harder. Ships that were nearly destroyed found new strength. Crews that had been fighting for weeks without rest refused to give up. They could feel victory approaching, and they would not let it slip away. In the other dimension, the second anchor died. Then, minutes later, the third. Kevin Park stood on the bridge of the Dawn's light, watching the last anchor crumble. His ship was barely functional. Most of his crew was dead. But they had done it. After 12,000 years, they had finally closed the door. Mission complete, he said into the fleet-wide channel. His voice was weak, but he was smiling. All surviving ships, thank you. It has been an honor. The rift began to collapse. In normal space, Lisa watched the impossible happen. The wound in space-time that had threatened the galaxy for 12,000 years began to close. Its edges drew together like a healing cut. The strange energies that had sustained it faded away, and they, Devourers trapped on this side, began to die, cut off from their home dimension, from the collective intelligence that had guided them for millions of years. They became confused, lost. The connection that had made them so dangerous was gone. They were just creatures now, and creatures could be killed. The Allied fleet descended on them with 300 years of accumulated fury. Weapons that had been designed to fight endless hordes now faced a finite enemy. It was no longer a battle. It was an execution. When it was over, when the last Devourer had been destroyed, and the rift had closed to nothing more than a fading scar in space, Lisa stood on the bridge of the Unconquered and wept. She wept for Admiral Kevin Park and the 3,000 volunteers who had given everything. She wept for the millions who had died during the weeks of battle. She wept for the 12,000 years of war that had finally ended. And she wept with joy because they had won. 6 months later, Lisa attended the dedication ceremony for the Kevin Park Memorial Station, constructed at the site where the rift had once threatened all existence. Representatives from every species in the Alliance were present. The station hung in space where darkness had once waited to consume them all. Director Beth Callahan, ancient beyond measure, gave the dedication speech. Her voice was strong despite her age, carrying across the assembled crowd. Admiral Park once told me that humanity's greatest strength was not our technology or our military power. It was our stubbornness, our absolute refusal to accept defeat, no matter the odds. She looked down at the gathered delegates. Species that had been strangers 3 centuries ago, but were now united forever. That stubbornness saved us all, and it will continue to save us as long as we remember what we learned in this war. No species stands alone. Our differences are nothing compared to what unites us. Together, we can face anything the universe sends against us. Lisa thought of Admiral Park's last transmission, sent just before the Dawn's Light was destroyed. 7 words that would be carved into monuments across 1,000 worlds. Tell them we held the line. They had held the line. They had paid the price. And now, for the first time in 12,000 years, the galaxy could breathe freely. Later that night, Lisa stood alone at an observation window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, on thousands of worlds, beings of every shape and form were celebrating. The war was over. The enemy was gone. The future stretched out before them, unlimited and full of possibility. She raised a glass to the window, to the empty space where the rift had been. "Thank you," she whispered. "All of you. We will never forget." The stars twinkled in response, peaceful and bright. The darkness that had waited beyond them for so long was gone. Humanity and its allies had faced the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. And they had won, not because they were the strongest, not because they had the best weapons, but because they had stood together, because they had refused to give up, because when the universe had sent monsters to consume them, they had looked those monsters in the eye and said no. The dawn had finally arrived, and it was beautiful.